All right, work continues on my scratch building of my accurate interior on the Clavius 3D printed moon base. I interrupt this regularly scheduled build part of the Clavius 2001 base to tell you about some changes that came about. I thought I'd be a little humorous there and just kind of wipe the table off. I always love when people do that. They just wipe a table. We're done with this and start all over. So basically that's kind of what I'm doing. After I had posted my last video, which we'll call this one part 1.5 of the Clavius 2001 moon base build, because I was contacted by Jerry Schaefer, who is the creator of the Clavius base file from CGTrader.com. And so we talked on the phone, and I shared with him the brighter photo of the interior from Mark Dowman that he provided, and also some images of my scratch build that I had begun. And he went back very quickly, in fact, and redesigned the whole interior, which is really quite awesome. And he actually created a couple different versions. So he has one version where you have a half of the entire interior and you just print it twice and you flip it. And he has another one where it's in quarters, and then a third one which is in eighths. Now the first two have the built-in octagonal pad that surrounds the square pad that drops down into the base. And in all of these versions, by the way, you're going to still use the square landing pad that he made with the pre-drilled holes for lights. You're going to use the surrounding parts and everything else that's in the kit. All this is replacing are the, well, in the actual original file, the two halves that were the interior that are highly inaccurate. You're still going to use the dome parts and all that. So he did a really great job, and I'll show you here in a moment. And he, the eighth one is the one that works the best for me, because I'm printing it at 200%. So just a little note here. So a lot of the issues that I'm running into as far as the size and cutting pieces and that sort of thing are only because I'm printing this very large at 200%. And even on my Saturn, which has a pretty good size print bed, I'm still having to cut some of these pieces in half to make them fit better. If you were to print this at 100%, if I were to print this at 100% normal size, it would fit perfectly on my Saturn with no problem at all. And I could print all the parts that he made just exactly as they are. I could do the two halves of the interior. I could do everything else just all together without having to cut them. But my whole build is basically determined by the size of the little Ares 1B, the Stargazer kit, which I want to make in a close approximation of the scale. It's still not quite the right scale. It's a little small, and I've talked about that with some other people on Facebook as well. But it's going to be in flight. It's going to be up above the dome base. The dome base is going to be about halfway opened up with the little wedges of the curved dome, and you're going to see inside, and there are going to be lights in it. So it didn't have to be completely perfect as far as the scale, and I ended up ending on a or being satisfied with a scale that looks accurate enough. But if I were to land the ship down inside, you would tell that it's a little bit too big for the base. But let me go ahead and we'll look at the new part that I printed. I did print it in eighths, as I said, and he's still doing a little bit of perfecting. I'm printing out some of these parts just to kind of demonstrate how they work and give him feedback. And then he's going to update those on CGTrader.com to be the accurate parts for anyone who's purchased it already. You'll have access to it, or anybody that wants to get it in the future will also have access. So I do highly recommend this a lot, and I'm really thankful for Jerry for getting together with me and in correcting it. You know, definitely kudos to him, and he's done a fantastic job, and he did it very quickly. So the nice thing about this new base that he has made, the interior, is that with a little bit of adjustments, I can print the 8th part flat down on my bed, so it's only the thickness of the actual part, which is thicker than it used to be. So rather than taking 16 hours for the quarters that I had to print, it now only takes about 5 hours for an 1/8. So yes, I'm printing twice as many parts, but it's a lot quicker than 16 hours, and I can bust out several of those a day, which is a lot easier to do. And also the octagonal part around the square landing pad, I ended up cutting mine in half for the same reason, that I could put it flat, and that prints in about an hour, so that's even better. And all the other parts don't take quite as long, so I'll be able to bust these out pretty quickly. And yet again, I had to put another order of resin in. So I'm using a lot more resin than I would have normally if I had these originally, but it's still not anywhere near the kind of expense I'd be looking at if somebody cast this in resin or printed it for me and sold it to me. I'd be looking at a couple $100 for something like this. So, all right, so fantastic. Let's go ahead and take a look at the new parts. All right, so other than the ring parts and the center platform that I had already printed, the other parts are just no longer going to be used in this kit, in this model, for obvious reasons. So Jerry did a great job of making the interior more accurate, and as I showed in the previous stills, he has a couple of options. He has 2 halves that make up this part, which are too big for me to print at this scale. And he has a quarter, which is also too large, and then he has the 1/8. And here's the 1/8, the first one I printed. Well, it's the second one. The first one failed, and so I went back in. He had this part here extending down, and it was sticking up, and so you couldn't place it flat. So when I placed it this way, it failed and it broke off for some reason. So I went back in to Prusa slicer. I cut off the bottom so this was flush. So this fits flush right down onto the build plate. And you can see, let me show you if I can get you can see it's a little thin on this edge, but it doesn't matter. It's fully sealed. It didn't cause any failures. There's some minor little issues on the sides, but I don't really care about that, or the back. This I'm gonna sand smooth anyway. And the same with this, I'm going to sand that smooth. And I believe I'm going to use that very thin styrene that has the ridges in it to put down into this part here, just on this part on the floor. And you can see that that's open, so that can be lit. And I can put a piece of glass in that. Look like there's people in there. You have your side detail. And just like I was going to do originally, I can add additional stripping and tubes and whatever to make this look a little more detailed, because once I do all 8 of these, you know, there'll be another one of these on this side. So this will be thicker, and on this side. So basically this side will marry up with this side on each other one that I make. But certainly a whole lot better, and nice and deeper as well. So I will be looking at cutting a circle into the wood that I'm going to be putting this on for the lunar surface, sinking it down in a little bit so it matches up with the outer rings, and also allows me to use less clay when I make the lunar surface on the outside. Now on the 1/8 ones, he did not include this surrounding octagonal section for this. The other ones he did. It's built into it. So this one you just print separately. Now, I could have printed the whole thing and tilted it up, but it wouldn't fit flat onto my build plate, so I just cut it in half, which is just as easy. And all I have to do is glue these 2 halves together. And I'm going to do the same situation because this is set down inside. I'm going to take that ridged styrene sheet and I'm going to cut out a piece that fits inside of this. That way it's going to cover these two big seams, and then I just will have the seams over these little ridges on the sides. Well, I don't think you'll even see the sides, because the way this works is you have this on here, which fits perfectly. The other side, of course, will go over here. Yeah, he really did do a good job of making this fit. Yeah, once I get those glued together, those will be fine. All right, so that will extend out that landing platform so that it gives it the realistic image as in the film, where the center square is the part that drops down in with the elevator. The outer part stays stationary, and the outer part then, of course, will match up to this right here. Now, I have noticed that, as you can see, this is not level, which it should be. All that means is that the height of this is a little bit off, but it's not a big deal because I'm going to be gluing this together and gluing this onto the outer pieces. So I'll make it level. It's going to end up being like this. And there's a bit of a lip right there. So that's going to be pretty cool. And then obviously, when I print the other 7, they're just going to go all the way around, and they're going to make this look like it's supposed to. And then, just like I was going to do for the original, and again, keep in mind, that's why this has to be sunk down into the wood, because this has to be the right height. This has to be, really, this piece, the top of this, should be level with the top of this. And then, of course, that's the same curve. He did let me know that he made the diameter the same. So when I do all 8 of these, or if you do the 2 halves, they're going to be the same diameter as the original parts that were inaccurate. So these parts are still fine. You can still use those just as you would have. And but this is taller, so you're going to have to sink it down or raise this up, whichever approach you take, in order to make that work. So let me go ahead and get the dome pie slice and show you how that's going to look. All right, so this was still a little short. I just put a couple pieces of styrene under it to kind of make it look more of a level. So this is kind of what it's going to look like. And again, I'll be able to determine this by how deeply I sink this whole piece down into the wood, so that when this is sitting up on the top, it's going to be level. And these are going to be level all the way around. And certainly, once I get these done, I will glue all 8 of these together. So this will be all one piece. And this will be glued together. This I will leave separate because I still want to put in the fiber optics before I do anything else. But I want to get the whole outer ring done like I did before, put all together, and then I can start working on detailing it. But that'll give me an idea of how I will cut out the wood so it sinks it down. But what's going to happen then is this is going to go in like so. Let's see if I can get down a bit. And I kind of determined that I can glue that into that little ridge right there and really, you know, epoxy the heck out of it so it's in there nice and solid. So this will be centered on this piece. Sorry for my hand being in the way when I glue these on. But then that's going to stick up over top, like you can see, and you'll be able to see the interior still. And again, it's hard to get an idea without having the rest of it built, but it's certainly going to be far more accurate than the other piece was. So, all right, fantastic. All right, so here is the little stargazer Ares 1B on the platform. Now, a couple people pointed out the size differences between these images in the film. Now, you have to understand that we're looking at different models at different times in those film clips. Obviously, when we see the dome and we see it opening, that's a model. That is not in scale with the model of the Ares 1B by any means. This model, the Ares 1B model, is pretty large. I think it's like, I might be mistaken, but it's about a foot wide, or no, it's bigger than that, because it's bigger than the model from Mobius. It's probably about 2 feet wide. It's a pretty good sized model. So when we see it landing on the landing pad and the pad drops down, that's a whole separate model, of course, than the model of the dome opening up, which is a completely separate thing and a separate scale. So there's going to be some differences. We don't actually see the ship going down into the dome with the pie-shaped wedges opened up or anything else. We don't ever see that. We never see that happen. We see the dome opening. We see a reverse shot, and they're superimposing the ship through the spokes of the dome, which I'm sure it's not really there. It's just an image they made look like it was landing through there. And then we see the ship itself landing on just a pad. We see no other detail. We see nothing of this. We just see the ship landing on a pad. And then it lowers, and I'm assuming it's the same model of the ship on that big part there, which even some of that might be superimposed, because that would be a huge underneath interior when it drops down. But let me show you a couple of images, and then we'll kind of talk about them. All right, so here's the still that we see, or the image from the film itself. And you can see it's fairly darkened, so we're not really seeing inside very well to see the detail other than the lighting of the landing pad. And then here is the very much lightened version from Mark Dauman that shows a really clear inside imagery and of the lighted landing pad. This is the same still, it's just lightened up considerably on the very last frame where we can see inside. And here's an image that I also got from Facebook from Mark Dauman, which is really interesting. It looks like the model fully opened and you can see inside, but notice in the back there's a ladder, so you can kind of see the scale of it. And then of course here's the large model landed on the landing pad. And the landing pad looks much larger on this image, which doesn't seem to be in the right scale with the other things we see. So let's look at the next image. Here it is coming down, and suddenly now the ship seems to fit just nicely on that landing pad, and it seems to be much smaller. At least the landing pad is. But a lot of these are perspective, and that's basically where it comes down to. And there it is inside in a black and white still, and you can see how it almost fills the landing pad. And again, I think this is a smaller model of the Ares that was put onto that. I'm not sure. If anybody can enlighten me on that, that would be nice as well. But it seems like if that was a 2-foot model, it would be way too big to fit inside this big giant interior. So, all right, so here's the bottom line, really, when it comes to any of this. If we're talking about the Ares itself, the discrepancies with the interior, with the sets, with the models, with anything else, these are films. So the images we see are, created to make us think that we're seeing something. We're really not. We're not really seeing a spaceship landing on a landing pad. We're not really seeing the interior that really fits inside the spaceship, and so on and so on and so on. So you have to use your judgment. And as I've said before many times on other builds, in the end, I'm going for an image of something that looks like what you see in the film. Now, certainly the issue with this one is we don't ever see the Ares next to the dome at all. It's never shown because they didn't make a model small enough that would be the right scale to that dome model. And the big one would be way out of scale with it. Obviously, since I showed that other image that there were some ladders in the background, it's not very big, but it's a bunch of different models that they've used on the film in order to splice together, edit together to come up with the final image. And unless you were really scrutinizing it as, I am right now because I'm building a model of this, the average viewer of the film isn't going to notice any discrepancies. They're not going to notice any differences in the scale or the size when it switches from the big model with a landing pad in the middle to the dome with a landing pad in the middle to the big model landing on another model of the landing pad and a third model coming down into underneath it and all that. So I think mine is going to look accurate, close enough accurate to the scale of the Stargazer, and it's also going to keep it within a reasonable scale, since if I made it any larger, it would just be out of control, and it's already going to be pretty big at about 2 foot by 2 foot, which this diorama is going to end up being. So, all right. So let me go ahead and I'm going to do a few more things on the parts that I have and show you some modifications, speaking of the landing pad, and then we'll wrap up this video for this week. So, all right. All right, so I took the Plastruct. Hold on a second, let me get that for you. Sorry. Plastruct wood planking, styrene sheet. Very, very thin, fine groove on it, and I measured the piece to match this part, and before I did that, I cut away all the rest of it because it was too short anyway to reach up to this, and the easiest way would be to glue this into these two pieces. And I'm going to use the same material on this part, and we'll do one piece all around that as well. And so then I took my pin vise and I went through, and from the back I drilled all the holes back out. And cutting away the sides also makes it much easier for me to put fiber optics in this and bring them all down into one tube to light. All right. Oh, and what I did was I took this, once I got it cut to the right size, I put down some CA glue over this whole piece, put that down on it, and just pressed it down firmly until it dried and set up. And it didn't harm the styrene any. And it's really hard to see in the camera, but when I get it painted and I put a wash, it's going to bring out that kind of a grain in a way. Trying to get closer here. You can kind of make it out. All right. And I'll also be doing some other parts, because there's some kind of a symbol on here where it lands. I'm gonna have to look at the picture some more, figure out how that is. There's also some little bits of very thin stripping along some different spots. So we'll see, we'll get it decorated up. But what I can do is I can glue this into here. Make sure that it's flush into both sides. Before I do that, I'll get the piece cut out that's going to go in here. But yeah, this will be all glued together. This will be one whole piece. And I'll put some stripping along the edge of this to accentuate it, to give you the idea, obviously, that it's a separate panel that it's going to go down inside. Hold on, let me do that again. I was trying to turn it over so you could see that once I get this all glued together and I get the styrene on the top part, this will be very easy access to get all of the fiber optics into. You'll be able to do that. And this whole part in the middle is going to be opened up. So basically, you're going to have like these pieces that are going to come up to here. So all this is opened up. None of this is closed up. There'll be a piece here, obviously, all the 8. So there'll be plenty of room underneath to be able to bundle together the fiber optics, put them together and get them lit up. And likewise, I'll be able to do the same with putting a light down into this, or in a few of these, to light up as well, and bringing them down into here as well to light up. So, okay. right, so I glued the two halves of the outer platform together, and then I glued the middle section into it. So this is all one piece, and I made sure that this was flush with the rest of it. So that's set up. Just to kind of let you know, the glue I'm using, and I use this Bob Smith Industries, and I use this stuff called Super Gold because it's odorless, and it really is odorless. I can't use the regular CA glues because they're just so potent. They really irritate my nose and my eyes. This stuff works good, and it also is safe with foam, but it works just like regular CA glue. I think that's why it didn't wrinkle this thin styrene sheet, because it's safe for that kind of thing. And really, I only use this when I'm using things like resin, metal, other things that normal glues aren't going to work with. I could use it with I could use something like 5-minute epoxy, but this was actually better to use. So, all right. So before I did that, I measured off and I cut out this. It sliced a little too far on the one piece, but I got it to fit so that it's the right dimensions inside. But I wanted to glue this down first before I end up gluing this in place. And then I'll just do the same thing. I'll just put the CA glue. And I want to make sure to line up the lines. So the lines that are going the one direction on this piece, I want to line up with this piece so they're the same. And once that's done, I'm just going to put some stripping around the edge to kind of clean up that gap, whatever's there. And then other than a little bit of detailing, that'll finish the surface of this. So let me go ahead and get that glued down. All right, so as I showed in the previous stills, I got this piece glued down, and then I went ahead and put styrene around the edge to make a demarcation, and I also put it around the edge of this in order to fill it in and fill in any gaps because it wasn't perfect. And then what I started to do on the actual, well, you can see on the clearer, the lighter images of the interior that there's actually a symbol in the middle of the landing pad. It's almost like there's some lines coming down if you're looking at it from a certain orientation, and then it's kind of a partial octagon, almost like a C and a reverse C kind of a thing in the middle. And so I was looking at that, and I was going to start working on it with some styrene and put that into the pad along with some other lines, and I just couldn't get it to work right. And it wasn't looking right. So let me go ahead and show you an image of that, and I'll kind of talk you through it and explain what the problem is. All right, so here's the wider shot, the larger shot, showing the square in the middle there. And you can see that design I was telling you about, like the partial octagon and the two lines. Here's a closer shot of it. Now, the issue here is that if you look at the sides of the square landing pad in the middle, they are not parallel with one of the octagon sides. There's a point in the middle if you took a line. So here's how it looks now. You can see how it's parallel. It needs to be shifted, maybe about 30 degrees. The points of the square need to be pointing to the points of part of the octagon, and the flat sides have one of the points at the end, as you can see. All right, so this is off. This is an incorrect orientation, as I said. So as you can see, the points of these should be pointing towards one of the points of the octagon and a little bit of space between them. And then the flat part, you have like this pointed part sticking out that way. That's how it's supposed to look. So when I was trying to figure out where to put that centerpiece, it just wasn't working, because no matter how I oriented it, it wasn't lining up right, because these are not supposed to be parallel with this. So this shouldn't be like this. It should be more like this. It's kind of weird, I know. So I talked to Jerry. He's going to go ahead and redo this. So what he figured out, since I had been needing to do that anyway, and this part was also incorrect as far as the height. He's going to redo it so that this is all one piece for the 8th, and it's still going to have the holes in it, and he's going to put some raised indentations, just like he did, well, raised sections around the square, just like he did around the edge. And then that'll be something that can be reprinted. And he's going to also work on the half and the quarter parts of the outer ring in order to get those to include that as well, since there's really no reason for that to be having its own separate part that comes down with overhangs and everything. It's just not necessary. So I'm gonna let this go for now, and then once he gets that done, I'm gonna go ahead and reprint it and redo it. I didn't notice it until I got everything all done. I mean, it's not a big deal. It was mostly just a little bit of time that I spent on it, but the materials aren't that bad. I can finish the rest of it with what I have and get it done once he gives me that. And I can still do exactly what I did, cut out a square of this in the middle, cut out the other part for the outer part, and then just drill the holes through his holes just like I did. So, all right, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this part 1.5. Definitely getting closer to the final design of this, and a lot of good progress. I know it seems like it's one step forward or 3 steps forward, 1 step back, but in reality, it's just getting this to where it needs to be and getting all the parts to be the way they ought to be. A lot of good proof of concept on this video. Definitely printing the one section of the 8th, showing that I can use the that styrene sheet with the ridges in it to add some detail onto those parts. And we're going to go ahead and get that center octagon perfected, so that'll work better with it. And also getting the other parts the way they ought to be for other people once he makes it a part of the CGTrader file. So this is kind of the research and development part where we hash out any issues, and I'm kind of the guinea pig, but I'm glad to be, because I'm getting a really nice accurate model out of it in the end. So, all right, so I am waiting for my new supply of resin to come in, which should be the next few days, and for Jerry to go ahead and get that part finished up for me, and then I'll be ready to start printing those again, and then continue on this Clavius build with the real part 2 here somewhere down the road. So, okay, well, thanks to all my new subscribers, and I will see you in the next video.